No. A 12-year-old's silence spoke louder than any answer on the board. But what Steve Harvey discovered beneath that silence would stop the cameras, shatter every rule in television, and remind millions what it means to truly see someone. 300 people watched, only one understood, and what happened next? No script could have prepared anyone for it. Tuesday afternoon, Family Feud Studios, Atlanta. The lights blazed with their usual intensity, casting that familiar golden glow across the stage. Steve Harvey stood at center stage, microphone in hand, doing what he'd done thousands of times before, making America laugh, connecting families, creating those moments of joy that made the show a household tradition. The Martinez family from Tucson faced the Chen family from Portland. Standard setup, standard energy, standard game. Except for one thing, one quiet detail that most people missed, but Steve Harvey didn't, because that's the thing about Steve. After decades of reading audiences, reading contestants, reading the room, he developed an instinct for sensing when something was off. And something was definitely off with 12-year-old Mason Chen. Mason stood at the end of his family's podium, hands gripped tight on the buzzer. Average height for his age, dark hair falling slightly over his eyes, wearing a blue polo shirt that looked freshly pressed. His family surrounded him, his parents, his older sister Sarah, his uncle David, all animated, excited, playing the game with genuine enthusiasm. But Mason was somewhere else entirely. Steve had noticed him during the family introductions. While everyone else bounced with nervous energy, Mason stood perfectly still. When Steve crouched down to his level, the way he always did with younger contestants, Mason had offered a smile, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach the eyes, the kind of smile Steve recognized because he'd worn it himself once long ago, when he was homeless and pretending everything was fine. "Mason Chen, my man," Steve had said, extending his hand. "How old are you, buddy?" 12? Mason replied softly. 12, that's a great age. What do you like to do for fun? A pause. Just a fraction too long. I like reading. Reading? That's what I'm talking about. Smart young man right here, folks? The audience applauded and Steve moved on, but that pause lingered in his mind, that hesitation before such a simple answer. The game progressed through 2 rounds. The Chen family was crushing it, racking up points with solid answers. Mason's sister Sarah was particularly sharp, nailing the number 1 answer twice. His parents high-fived. His uncle pumped his fist. Standard Family Feud energy, except Mason never celebrated. He clapped politely when his family scored, but his heart wasn't in it. His eyes kept darting toward the exit doors, then back to the game board, then down to his shoes. Steve kept watching between questions, that instinct getting stronger. Something about the way Mason held himself, protective, closed off, like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. Steve had seen that posture before, in his motivational speaking, in his mentorship work. That was the posture of someone carrying weight too heavy for their frame. Round 3. Fast money time. Mason's father went first. Scored a respectable 56 points. The family erupted in celebration. They needed just 44 more points to win the $20,000. Mason would go second. This was it. This was their moment. "All right, Mason." Steve walked over, that trademark energy lighting up his voice. "Your pops did great. You ready to bring this home for your family?" Mason nodded, but Steve saw it. The way his jaw tightened, the way his hands trembled slightly as they gripped the podium. This wasn't excitement. This was something else. "You got this, young man, just like we practiced, remember?" Another nod. "Okay, here we go." 20 seconds on the clock. Steve held up his cards, ready to launch into the rapid-fire questions. But then he looked at Mason, really looked at him, and saw tears forming in the boy's eyes. Not falling yet, but gathering, threatening. The audience didn't notice. The family didn't notice. The cameras kept rolling, but Steve Harvey noticed. And in that instant, he made a choice that would define not just this episode, but what Family Feud could be at its highest calling. Steve lowered his cards slowly. "Hold up," he said, his voice dropping from performance mode into something deeper, more real. "Hold up, just a second." The music didn't stop yet. The audience still buzzed with anticipation, but Steve raised his hand toward the production booth. Cut the music. Silence fell across the studio like a curtain. Mason, Steve said gently, stepping closer. You okay, son? Mason's lips pressed together, holding something back. He nodded again, but a single tear escaped, tracking down his cheek. The audience began to realize something was happening, an unscripted something. The kind of moment that transforms television from entertainment into witness. Steve set his cards down on the podium. Not dropped, but placed deliberately, like a man setting down one roll to pick up another. He walked around to Mason's side of the podium and knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the boy. No cameras angled for the perfect shot, no dramatic music cue, just a man and a child, and whatever truth existed between them. Talk to me, Steve said quietly. What's going on? Mason shook his head, biting his lip. It's okay. We got all the time in the world. These lights, these cameras, this game, none of that matters right now. You matter. What's happening? The studio held its breath. 300 people collectively suspended in this intimate moment, sensing they were witnessing something profound. Mason's voice came out barely above a whisper. I can't do this. Can't do what, buddy? I can't pretend anymore. Steve's expression shifted. That instinct, that recognition, it crystallized into understanding. Pretend what? And then it came out, the truth that Mason had been holding inside, the secret he'd been hiding behind that careful smile, that quiet demeanor, that invisible armor he built around himself. That I'm okay, Mason whispered, that I'm happy, that everything's fine, I can't keep pretending. The words hung in the air like a confession, like a prayer, like a plea for someone to finally see him, really see him. Steve's eyes closed for just a moment. When they opened, they were wet. How long you been pretending, son? Since Mason's voice cracked. Since Dad lost his job. Since Mom started working 2 shifts. Since Sarah had to quit college to help. Since everyone started saying, it's okay, we'll get through this. We're strong, we're a family, but I'm not strong. I'm scared and I'm tired of pretending I'm not. Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. The confession seemed to break something open in the studio. Mason's mother brought her hand to her mouth, tears streaming. His father's face crumbled with realization, the weight his son had been carrying, invisible to them because they'd all been too busy carrying their own. Sarah stepped forward instinctively, but Steve gently raised a hand, asking for just a moment more. Come here, Steve said, and pulled Mason into a hug. Not a quick television hug, a real one. The kind where you hold someone because they need to be held, because words have reached their limit and only presence matters now. The studio audience, hardened by years of watching television tapings, trained to applaud on cue, sat in stunned silence. Many were crying. Some had their hands clasped as if in prayer. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was witness. This was church. Steve held Mason until the boy's shoulders stopped shaking. Then he pulled back, keeping his hands on Mason's shoulders, looking directly into his eyes. Listen to me. You listening. Mason nodded. Pretending to be strong isn't strength. You know what real strength is? What you just did. Telling the truth when it's hard. Admitting you're scared when everyone expects you to be fine. That's courage. That's real courage. He turned to address Mason's family, his voice carrying that weight of authority, mixed with compassion that had made Steve Harvey more than just a comedian or a host, that had made him a voice people trusted. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I don't know your whole story, but I know this. Your son just taught all of us something. He taught us that families don't have to be perfect. They just have to be honest. Mason's father stepped forward, his own walls finally crumbling. Mason, I'm sorry. I thought if we just stayed positive, kept moving forward, you kids wouldn't feel the stress. I didn't realize I was teaching you to hide instead of heal. Sarah joined them, wrapping her arms around her little brother. You don't have to be strong for us, Mason. We're supposed to be strong for each other, all of us, together. Steve stood, wiping his own eyes with the pocket square he always kept perfectly folded. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna finish this game, but first, I want everyone in the studio to understand something. He turned to face the audience, the cameras, the millions who would eventually watch this moment. We live in a world that tells us to hide our struggles, to post the highlight reel, to smile even when we're breaking, to pretend everything's fine when it's falling apart, and we're teaching our kids to do the same thing. This young man just showed us a different way. Vulnerability isn't weakness, truth isn't failure, and asking for help, that's not giving up, that's growing up. The applause started slow, then built like thunder. Not the manufactured excitement of a game show, but something deeper: recognition, gratitude, solidarity. "Now," Steve said, turning back to Mason with a gentle smile, "you still want to answer these questions, or you want your Uncle David to take your spot? Either way's fine. This is your call." Mason wiped his eyes, took a shaky breath, and looked at his family. Really looked at them, seeing them now not as people he had to protect with his silence, but as people who wanted to protect him with their love.
"I want to try," he said, "but can they stand with me?"
Steve's face broke into a genuine smile. They absolutely can. What happened next broke every rule in the Family Feud handbook. The Chen family all gathered around the podium. With Mason, Steve asked his questions, and when Mason didn't know an answer, his dad helped. When he hesitated, Sarah whispered encouragement. They answered together, not as one person trying to win alone, but as a family carrying the weight together. They didn't get all the points. They didn't win the $20,000, but when the final buzzer sounded, when the board revealed they'd fallen just short, nobody cared. The Chen family was hugging, crying, laughing, connected in a way they hadn't been in months, maybe years. But Steve Harvey wasn't finished. He pulled out his personal phone, something he never did during taping, and made a call right there on stage. When someone answered, he said simply, "I got a family here that needs help. Real help. I'm sending you their information." He turned to the Chens. "My foundation works with families going through financial hardship. We provide job placement assistance, emergency financial support, and counseling services. You're not in this alone anymore. You hear me? You're not alone." Mrs. Chen broke down completely. Mr. Chen couldn't speak. Sarah held Mason close, both of them finally releasing months of accumulated fear and stress and pressure. Steve knelt down one more time in front of Mason. "You changed my show today. You changed these people's lives." He gestured to the audience. "But more than that, you changed your family, because you told the truth. Don't ever forget that." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his business card, something he'd only done a handful of times in his entire career. "You ever need to talk? You ever feel like you're pretending again? You call this number. I mean it. You call me." Mason took the card with trembling hands, looking at it like it was the most valuable thing he'd ever held. The episode that aired 4 months later became one of the most watched in Family Feud history. But more than the ratings, more than the viral clips, more than the trending hashtags, it started something unexpected. Families across the country began having conversations they'd been avoiding. Kids started telling their parents about struggles they'd been hiding. Parents started admitting to their children that strength doesn't mean hiding weakness, it means sharing burdens. Steve Harvey received thousands of messages from viewers saying that Mason's moment had given them permission to stop pretending, to ask for help, to be honest about their struggles. Mental health organizations reported an uptick in calls to their hotlines. School counselors noticed students opening up more readily. The Chen family's story had a happy ending too. Through Steve's foundation connections, Mr. Chen found employment at a tech company that valued his skills. Sarah was able to return to college with scholarship assistance, and Mason started seeing a therapist who helped him process the anxiety he'd been carrying. He learned that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. But perhaps the most profound change happened within the Chen family itself. They instituted a new tradition, truth dinners, where everyone had to share one real thing, something they were struggling with, worried about, or needed help with. No pretending, no performing, just truth. Mason's card from Steve still sits on his desk, framed next to a photo from that day on Family Feud. Not the staged family photo they took before the show, the real one, the moment after Mason's confession, when the family was hugging, crying, holding each other. Raw and real and beautiful. Steve Harvey later said in interviews that Mason reminded him why he does what he does. "I'm not just a host. I'm not just a comedian. I'm someone who's been where these people are, broke, scared, pretending everything's fine when it's falling apart. And if I can use this platform to tell one kid, you don't have to pretend anymore, then that's worth more than all the ratings in the world." The episode sparked discussions in media circles about the role of television in addressing mental health, family stress, and economic anxiety. Some critics argued it was exploitation, but those who watched the unedited footage, those who saw Steve's immediate instinct to stop the show, his genuine concern, his follow-through with real support, understood it was something different. It was television at its most human.
And Mason?
He's 15 now, thriving in high school, active in peer counseling programs, where he helps other kids who are struggling to stop pretending and start healing. He still watches Family Feud, but it means something different to him now. It's not just a game show. It's the place where he learned that the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when, especially when that truth is, "I'm not okay." Because sometimes being seen is more valuable than any prize. Sometimes stopping the show is more important than finishing the game. And sometimes a 12-year-old boy can teach an entire nation what courage really looks like. Steve Harvey still keeps an extra pocket square in his jacket, still stops the show when his instinct tells him someone needs to be heard rather than entertained, because he learned something that day too. That the most powerful moments in television happen not when you follow the script, but when you have the courage to throw it away and simply be present for another human being's truth. Share this story. Make sure it's never forgotten. Because in a world that teaches us to hide, Mason Chen taught us to be seen, and that lesson is worth more than all the points on any board.